Good day, U.S. history students. Mr. Deegan back in the VidNote zone for Unit 5, Lesson 2. It's the 5-2 video. Let's write our learning target. I will understand the key leaders and major events of the Civil War era. Era meaning time period in the United States. Here it is, in blue, the United States of America in the 1860s. In red, the Confederate States of America. They want to create a separate country based on slavery. What will happen? Let's see. The summary, and the Civil War is from 1861 until 1865. The secession, meaning breaking away, of southern states triggered a costly war that concluded with Northern victory, thank goodness, and resulted in the restoration or return of the Union and emancipation, meaning freeing, of the slaves. That's the summary of the Civil War. The importance of the U.S. Civil War. The Civil War put constitutional government to its most important test as the debate over the power of the federal government versus states' rights reached a climax, meaning highest point. The survival of the United States as one nation was at risk, and the nation's ability to bring to reality the ideals of liberty, equality, and justice depended on the outcome of the war. This was the balance, federal rights versus states' rights. How did the Civil War start? As we learned in 5-1, at Fort Sumter in South Carolina in April 1861, a fort owned by the federal government is bombed by South Carolina soldiers. And here is an image of the South Carolina soldiers and their cannons shooting at this fort owned by the U.S. federal government. Key moment number 1 in the fighting of the Civil War. The name of this first battle was the Battle of Antietam. It was in Maryland, and it took place in September 1862. Why was Antietam important? First, the Union Army stops the Confederate Army from invading Maryland. Second bullet point, after the battle, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And here's an image that shows the battlefield in Maryland. What was the Emancipation, which means freedom, Proclamation, which means announcement? It was a freedom announcement. It did 4 things. First, freed slaves located in the rebelling states. Slaves that lived in the Confederacy were no longer slaves. They were freed. Second, the Emancipation Proclamation made the abolition of slavery a Northern War aim. It was officially a goal. 3, the Emancipation Proclamation discouraged any interference of foreign governments like Britain or France. This was a United States war. No foreign powers could come in and help. The Emancipation Proclamation allowed for the enlistment of African American soldiers in the Union Army. And here is a group of African American soldiers about to fight for the Union, for the North. Key moment number 2 in the fighting. The name of the battle was the Battle of Gettysburg in PA, Pennsylvania, in July 1863. Why was the Battle of Gettysburg important? Number 1, it was the turning point of the Civil War. Number 2, it had the largest number of casualties in the entire war. And number 3, the Union Army defeated the Confederate Army, ending the Confederates' attempt to invade the North. And if you were a Union soldier, this is what you were looking at. This is an actual picture of the battlefield as it stands now in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Lots of green grass, rolling hills. After the Battle of Gettysburg. President Lincoln gives his famous Gettysburg Address, and here's a sketch of him delivering that speech. Lincoln's speech described the Civil War as a struggle to preserve a nation that was dedicated to the proposition, the idea, that all men are created equal, and that was ruled by a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Lincoln also said America was, quote, one nation, not a collection of sovereign, meaning independent, states. Before this time, Southerners had believed that states could freely leave the U.S. if they wanted to. Why is the Gettysburg Address so important? President Lincoln gives his vision for America's future. Here's the vision. Lincoln believed the Civil War was fought to fulfill the promise of the Declaration of Independence, and the Civil War was a second American Revolution. Key moment number 3 in the Civil War. The name of the battle was the Battle of Appomattox in Virginia in April 1865. Why was the Battle of Appomattox so important? It was one of the last battles of the entire war. And after this battle, Confederate General Robert E. Lee, there he is in the gray uniforms of the Confederates, surrenders to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. And there is Grant in the navy blue Union uniforms. Where is Appomattox? Well, here's Charlottesville, this little dot in Albemarle County, and Appomattox is just south of Charlottesville in this red area right here, not too far from where we live. Robert E. Lee, he was one of the leaders in Appomattox. What did he do? Well, he was a Confederate general. You see the Confederate flag behind him. He was a Confederate general of the Army of Northern Virginia who urged Southerners to accept defeat and unite as Americans in 1865. So it's very important. He accepted defeat. Sometimes you lose, and he was willing to accept that. Some Southerners wanted to fight on after the Battle of Appomattox and hide in the woods and continue to fight the federal government. Lee said, no, we lost, we have to move on. Ulysses S. Grant, here he is. What did he do? He was the Union military commander who won victories over the South after other Union commanders had failed. Jefferson Davis, he was a leader of the Confederacy. You see the Confederate flag in the background. What did he do? He was a U.S. Senator from the state of MS. MS is Mississippi, who became president of the Confederate States of America. Lincoln was president of the United States, and Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. He was the king of the rebels. Frederick Douglass, here he is. What did he do? He was a former slave who became an abolitionist fighting against slavery when he was freed, and he urged President Lincoln to recruit former slaves to the Union Army. Frederick Douglass was educated, he was literate, and he was a major force because he was a slave. He knew what it felt like. So he was a big, powerful advocate for abolition and for Black rights in the 1800s. Summary questions. Please think of 2 questions that you would like to know more about. Write them down, and when you're done with that, you are done with 5-2. Have a good day. Mr. Deegan is signing off from the VidNote Zone.